You grew up in a family where money was important and stability is important. And now that coming to this stage where you run a physical product business, physical product business, which means that you needed to invest a lot of capital into the business itself and you need to constantly challenge your own money mindset. What is the thing that's driving you forward? Because you said that that's the only way, but the truth is, if a person doesn't have that gut and they will just give up, they're like, this is not my belief system. I believe in security. I believe in safety. Like, this is not what I signed up for. And I'm in a mistake. I'm going to go back. They told her to stay safe. She chose to stay real. Eva Woon left corporate success in management consulting, built Inari jewelry from the ground up, and landed on the runways of New York Fashion Week. In today's Rebel conversation, she's here to remind you, comfort isn't freedom. Let's dive in. Growing up, what did success look to you and your family?
I guess I can't really say for my family, but I think it's the same because otherwise it wouldn't have shaped my thought around what success looks like, right? But as a kid, it's always been like, oh, go to Harvard Business School, have a really good job, well paying, and then be able to make loads of money and buy my parents anything and like not worry about money. I think money was the key thing, right? Not having to worry about money and having paper certification that proves that you're smart to the world. I think that was pretty much what I thought my life would be.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So was it encouraged by your parents or was it something that you learned in school? Where did that come from?
I actually don't think it's encouraged by my parents. So I know I sound like a weirdo, but I used to be that kid at 9 years old that will be doing her homework in between classes. And at recess, I'll have like 5 minutes food or like 10 minutes of food, and then I'll run back and I'll try and finish my homework. So by the time I get home, if I'm not done, I'll be the first one who will take out all my homework, finish it all up before I do anything. My parents has actually never done anything to form that character. I just kind of feel like it's innate in me to be like, okay, let's like finish all the tasks off. Before we play. So it's always like very serious. Let's work before we play. So I've always grown up that way. My mom used to say like she never needed to check my homework. She never needed to do any of that. My dad never really said anything, but obviously he would have expectations in terms of like what subjects I could do, like what career path was good. So he was the most serious one, but my mom was always very free flow, very like encouraging of like whatever I wanted to do. But it was me that was always like, okay, I gotta get A-star, I gotta be like top 3 in class. I gotta go to Harvard Business School. I need to go to the best school. I need to, all of those things. Where it came from, I mean, like, I don't really know. It must be from somewhere, right? Probably the environment and what society teaches you that, this is what smart looks like. This is what like great looks like. This is what achievements looks like. So I feel like it probably came from that.
So you're basically the dream of every Asian parent, because every parent wanted to have a kid like that, right? So they don't need to do it.
You know what an Asian parent would do? An Asian parent would never tell you that they're proud of you.
That's true. So
doesn't like even if you like, it's like your dream child, they will never say that. It'd be like you could be better.
Did they actually tell you those things, or did they still tell you like you could be better? Like they didn't give you compliment.
My mom has always been the better one. My mom has always very proudly tell everyone that she's very proud of me. She's supportive of anything and everything that I do. My dad is the complete opposite. And I guess you can't have not two perfect Asian parents, but like two very encouraging Asian parents, right? My dad has always been, I think even in my wedding recently, he was giving a speech in terms of how like, well, she's only here because of me, and like she was stubborn, she was like, of all things, it was like all the bad things about you.
That's so funny.
Yeah, and I remember I really loved art as a kid. I was really good at it, I would think, right? I used to go for competitions, I will win competitions. And I remember for like 6th grade, I think it's not 6th grade, 12th grade in Malaysia, I really wanted to take art as part of my like examination. And my dad was like, why would you want to do that? Art is subjective. And if you don't get your perfect A, it's the culprit. Because of that, I didn't take it. Even though I would have loved taking it because I enjoyed it. So yeah, I definitely had some of that in my childhood. And even
Yeah.
adulthood, to be fair,
Yeah. I
you're
mean,
never good enough.
I got judged by my dad on me all the time. When I was
Yeah.
17, 18, I told my dad, I said, I want to go to study social psychology in the States. And I got
Hmm.
admitted into the best program of that. And then he
Yeah.
said that, well, English is not your first language. Like, you're not going to be able to be a psychologist. So he's like, how can you be
Ouch.
psychologist for like Americans?
And I'm
Yeah.
so funny he said that. And I'm sure, like, he came from it, from his best interest, right? Because I don't
Yeah.
think they're saying this because they don't love us. I think they do. They
Yeah.
just live in a very different world and in a very different mindset, right? Because they were brought up in a specific way where potentially being a doctor was like successful, being a police was successful. I don't know, like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think generation changes, right, over time.
Do you think there is, because what you just said in terms of your dad saying that, like art seems to be a less legit way as a career path. Do you think that like
Mm.
subconsciously affected you and also affected how you choose your early career path in a way?
Mm, I think early career path, not so much, but definitely subjects in school. Like I I would think, right. So the Malaysian education system is where in high school you have to pick, like when you're 15 you have to pick whether you want to go through science stream or art stream.
Yeah,
And to
same
be
in
fair,
China.
like, right? So like by default, I was like, okay, art stream is for the not so like smart
Not so
students.
smart
Science
kids.
stream, yeah, I don't know what to say, but that was literally the mindset that we had,
Yeah.
right? And like sorry, science stream is for the smart kids. No offense, but to be fair, I think the art kids were smart to pick art. I would have done it because
That's true. Yeah.
right? Because it is not art per se, but it's like business, finance, like economics, things that are actually important. Nobody told us about that. If I had a choice and I would have gone back, I would not have studied any of the science. Like I wouldn't have gone through the science stream. I would have gone
Science
through
is
the art
pretty
stream because
useless. In real
well, it
world.
depends on your career, right? It
Yeah,
depends on the
yeah,
career that you're in, right? But like in business,
yeah.
I want to know about finance. Like I had to learn the hard way. I had to learn accounting and uni, and my mom had to like dial in from Malaysia to the UK, and we had
Yeah.
like me and my classmates were taking accounting class from her because she's a financial controller.
Okay.
So she was
Yeah.
like, "This is how you do it," and I'm like. Damn, like if I knew this
Yeah.
earlier, I would have done art earlier. But because of like perception and like, what smart is supposed to look like, that kind of like I guess cultural and societal pressure, you end up just taking what other people think was good. I don't think our education system was very good. And I don't
Yeah.
think at that age when you have to decide what the rest of your career could look like or would look like, because it does send you down this funnel, right? Of like
Yeah.
what options you have. At that age, what do you know?
Yeah, and also I think that people who actually choose these paths like arts instead of science or engineering, even though they know
Mm,
that it might have I guess like less favored perception associated with it, they're more
mm.
honest, right, to themselves. Like if they
Yeah.
really like that and they choose it, that means
Mm.
that they don't really give a fuck about what other people think. Like there's
Yeah.
more. I mean, obviously, there's people who are not very good at like, science and they choose it to, but then the people who genuinely
It's
like
true.
it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, like I've seen some of my classmates who like took science and they struggled real hard. They didn't even enjoy it, right? And there are people who are in the art stream that like just excelled. And I think this is where probably our education system or like maybe parenting as well as future parents. Understanding where your passion lies. And I think it's really hard, right? It's really hard for them to know what your kid's passion would be at 15. What do I know?
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And honestly, if I were to like, pick for my future kids based off of what I know, I would want them to try everything and anything. Like go
Yeah.
out there, do arts, do science, do like things that are hands on. Go sell lemonades. I don't know. Like
Right.
learn as much as possible. Don't pivot. Like don't pigeonhole yourself so early because you
Right.
haven't even seen like the world. So I feel like it's the byproduct of like our education system, our what society feeds us, and also I mean from our parents' point of view, I feel like they were only giving us the best that they can and based off of what they knew back then, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's funny. Yeah, it's funny because like how like I said my dad didn't allow me to do arts for my 12th form like examination. Actually, when I quit my job, my consulting job, to pursue, this business, my dad was like, instead of doing jewelry, why don't you pursue art? Sell your art instead. Because I was painting as well, and I was like framing them, and I'm putting it in my parents'
Yeah.
house, and they get a lot of compliments whenever people visit. They would be like, "Oh wow, like where do you buy that from?" And my parents would very proudly say that it's from me. And so my dad was like, it's a 180 shift, right? From don't do
Mm.
art to why don't you pursue art as a business instead of jewelry? So
But
I guess time changes people.
what do you think? I don't know whether you've talked to him about it, but what did you
Hmm.
think was a trigger for him to make that realization himself?
Okay, so I have to give it to my dad. My dad is very forward thinking in that sense. So I wouldn't say like back in the days it was just all traditional. He was very practical, right?
Mm.
He was very practical. True art may ruin your scoring, and that might ruin your UCAS, which then
Mm.
will not allow you to get into the unis that you wanted to. So I do think that he's very tactical around that. And what I didn't realize back then was maybe that there is a balance between strategy and being tactical in your approach to life, and just I want to fuck it all and do what you want to do. Because
Mm.
truth be told, I am actually appreciative of like every single path that I went down. Because now that I'm running my own business at 33, right? Like those past 10 years of like working experience, that education system that I was put through, I wouldn't have been able to do like my business and grow
Mm.
it at this pace if it wasn't for all and everything that, was given to me, or the path that I was kind of like let
Mm.
down. So I feel like my dad has seen me do the traditional path. And I mean, like, I feel like there was a lot of like, I gotta prove myself. I gotta be smart. Because my dad has always been the figure where he's like, the first one in his family to go get a PhD overseas. He's got scholarship. His like, he's successful in his own way, right? So for him, he has always been like, I am right. No one else is right. Right. So for me, my life mission was always prove my dad wrong
Mm.
and I am smarter, So I think over time, I feel like he was just doing his best. And to be fair, I think he led me through down the right path. And now that he's seen like, okay, I've gone to the uni that he can say that he's proud that his daughter went to. So I went to LSE, and then I worked in London for 4 years, and then I moved to Singapore, and that was where I joined Oliver Wyman, where I met you.
Right.
To him, he has seen me go through that typical stage, and I was good at it. It wasn't that I was bad at it. I was good at
You're good at it, yes.
everything. I told my parents, right? I've made that decision, and I told them like, look, I'm giving myself 2 years. I actually didn't give them an option. I just said, I'm giving myself 2 years. This is what I'm going to do. And worst case scenario, I know I can go back, right? I want a consulting job. I can go interview for one, or the old company might take me back, right? And I've got
Yeah.
like verbal confirmation from people like, okay, I've got my backup plan. And I think for the first year or so, it was really hard for my dad to say much. I mean, like, he wasn't, to say, fully supportive. He wouldn't say it in front of my face. He would still think I made a silly decision in leaving. And I got a lot of comments from like aunties and like family friends saying like, kids nowadays are not tough enough. Like, you guys suffer a bit and like it's so hard. And I'm like, you don't know. You don't know, right? I think they are.
So I
Yeah.
want to kind of go back a little bit off a point where you mentioned, where you said that there is strategy and tactics in life, right? And
Yeah.
strategy, what do you think is the difference? I kind of know what you alluded to, but I think that's a very good point, and I want you to elaborate a bit on that if you can.
Okay, so what I mean by strategy and tactics is that, sure, look, like there are so many people out there who does whatever they want, right? But you don't always see success because you might not have the right foundation. You might not have the right amount of capital to start something. You might not have done your time or you've experienced certain things, right? And these are the things that, and not everybody can think that far ahead. And I certainly didn't at 15, right? And I think that is where, my dad probably thought that, okay, in order for her to pursue whatever she wants to pursue in the future, she needs to be equipped with skills, with like experiences, with, I guess, papers or certification on her CV that gets her through the door, which is very true. I don't think people pay enough like attention to that. And you can't just say, okay, I'm gonna throw it all up in the air and just go give it a try. Because realistically speaking, the chances of you succeeding with no knowledge, no capital, no certification or backup plan is very
It's
minute,
very
right?
limited.
Very, very small.
And
Yeah.
if you look at the tech unicorn founders like Zuckerberg
Yeah.
or Bill Gates, I mean they went to Harvard. They have
Yeah.
human capital. They're co-founders from the school, right?
Right.
There are
Right.
and they're also very well connected to the professor and the founding
Exactly.
community. And I think that people really, and I think it's that part people really underestimate it, right? Sometimes it's like
Yeah.
the certificate is very important for certain jobs. And also network is even
Mm.
more important for like everything you wanted to do in life.
Exactly. So you actually need to have in any plan, right, in the world, like you have to have a path. You have to have a strategy and a tactic. You need to know what's your timeline you're playing against. Not everybody think that way. I give it. I agree, right? Like you need to know what is your end goal. How are you going to get there? What do you need to be like skilled with or prepared with in order to get there and have the highest chance of success,
Yeah.
right? I'm talking like a
Yeah.
consultant, but the thing is, it's true.
You want to set yourself up for success. And I think that this is just my take on Asian parent. I know that we talk a lot about Asian parents. Maybe after this we'll move on. But I think that for Asian parent is there's different versions of them, right? And I think that there is a core uh, similarity is that they still have that foundation. They're like, okay, you're gonna get well educated. You will need to
Yeah.
get some stability in your life. You shouldn't just go out and be a homeless artist like when you're 15. Like they don't let you do whatever you want to a certain extent until perhaps you either have like established yourself that you're good at it, you have interest, or they have seen some traction. So, but there's also like Asian parents who are just like, you must play the piano, you must be
Yeah.
this way. I mean that is a bit toxic, I would say, right? Like it's not very flexible. But yeah, I think that they do have that like foundation. Like they almost wanted you to have like a bit of solid foundation before you can be like free.
Yeah, and I think yeah, you're right, right? Exactly. There are so many different types of Asian parents, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, it is about they have your best interest. They want you to succeed. I'm not saying every parent would be like, after 10 years in consulting, you can now go off and like be a starving artist. But not every parent will still be okay with that, right? And that's just to each their own, right? I am lucky enough, even though I had a dad who had a very traditional mindset, who didn't allow me to kind of like do certain things, at least at that point in time, I thought was traditional mindset. I actually think looking back, I feel like he was being very tactical. He was being very fair, right? And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's always like prove yourself. And that's how I feel like I've lived my life. It's always about, and I won't say it's a good thing. It's maybe like my childhood trauma kind of situation, right? Like I've always lived to prove myself. And I feel like I'm also a very small Asian girl. So when I worked in London, it was always also prove yourself because one, you're in a career where everyone is like, tall white male or like, it just look a specific
They
kind.
look the part. They look like they're doing the job.
Yeah, right. And unfortunately, society always think that because you look a certain way, and this has changed, right? But like this was when I first started working, like maybe 10 years ago. People were like calling me embryo because I'm like, young. You're so young. You look like you're 15, and I'm like editing clients who are CEOs or like C-level managers, and I'm like young, right? I always felt like I had to prove myself. Trying to quit my job and like going into my business, I also had to prove myself for a bit with my dad. Like we had arguments. I walked out the door. He was not always supportive, and I remember at dinner table, he was like, do you even make money?" He was like, "Do you even make money?"
It's a valid question. It's hurtful, right? Because you don't expect that from a supportive parent, but it's valid.
Yeah. No. I mean, like, I don't think it's just parents. My brother was the same. My brother, like, we got invited to New York Fashion Week last year, and my brother, and it was the same. Basically, New York Fashion Week was on Monday, and like my wedding was on Friday, and it's a 24-hour flight.
Was it
24-hour flight because we had to do and then it's a 12-hour time difference, which means there is no way that my flight could have been delayed before, like, in order for me to get home on time for the wedding. And this is like a 250 people wedding, like Chinese family, etc.
And it's like bride is missing, but you're not sure if the bride actually doesn't want to come,
So that was where I was like, if I don't do this, I don't know when I'm ever going to get this opportunity, right? But my brother was like, no, this is too hard. No, this is too much. Like, this is too risky. Don't do it. So I don't think it's just parents. I just think like how we are built and the environment that we're exposed in. I would say like I'm lucky enough to have gone overseas. I've lived abroad across many different countries for many years. I'm also a lot more, I would say rebellious, I would say, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
you know, when you say I can't do it, I'll prove you wrong. I will,
Yeah.
like I said, like I'm always in the process of like proving people wrong. And that's how I live my life, to be honest.
You use that as a fuel. So I wanted to ask
Correct.
you, I want to challenge you on this. Maybe it's a hot take,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
do you think the fact that you wanted to prove people wrong is because there's something to prove, like you felt like you're not good enough?
For sure. I think definitely. I mean, I think, and like honestly, before I actually transitioned to my role as an entrepreneur, I actually went through a lot of therapy. I'm like, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel trapped? Why do I feel like I'm good, but I don't feel fulfilled? I'm like, what's my purpose in life? I always ask myself, what's my purpose in life? And even
Mm,
today, I still ask the same question. Just
mm,
so that I'm realigned. But when I was going through therapy, that was where, you know, we really unpacked like I felt like I was not good enough for my dad because he was the smart one, he was the successful one. It was always living to his terms. Again, he wanted the best in me. I know I have his best interest, but I actually think the problem with Asian parents is communication.
for
It's
sure.
how they convey how they care about you. So instead of saying, okay, the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm thinking about this. And I think they don't know how to process that and they don't know how to share that because if you tell me that is why you're doing this and why you think this should be the case, happy to
Yeah,
take that, right? But
yeah,
I think instead it would be like, I am the dad and you are not. Like, get out of the
yeah,
car if you don't agree, or like, you know?
yeah.
So I used to be the kid in the family that will slam the door and continue arguing with my dad behind closed doors because he can't get to me, but I can make my point.
Right.
So I'm really the true rebel. But because of all of these, right? Like I always felt like I was not good enough for sure. But then I realized like after going through a lot of therapy and like living outside of home, yeah, I'm slowly trying to learn to undo that. And I do definitely not want to pass this trauma down to my kids, right?
Right.
Because I think that is where my people pleasing tendency comes from. That is where my competitiveness comes from. But like you say, I use it as my fuel. I recognize it and I use it as my fuel because I know of other people who have been in similar upbringing that reacts differently
We got
where
broken by
they
it.
let where they let that control the narrative of their life. And
Yeah,
until today, they are still living the trauma. And I'm like,
yeah,
honestly, move on, because like you say, right, action.
yeah. It's I mean, it's the the trauma response where like fight or flight or freeze, right? And
Mm,
some people might
yeah.
give up, or they can choose differently. And
Mm,
in a lot of high achievers I've seen, is that they choose to fight it. And it can be
mm,
from a strict upbringing, or it could also be coming from some people, they're fighting poverty, right? And then they're fighting for
yeah.
their entire family. They're fighting, like, there are so many things that they fight for. I'm really curious because you jump from consulting to jewelry. Obviously, they are not different, but
Mm,
also just the essence of it, right? Because consulting is
mm,
very competitive, as you mentioned, like a lot
mm,
about perception, how you present yourself. And
mm,
jewelry and arts, it's very creative, right? You need to believe that what you put out there is good. You need to go with your flow, and you need it to create from a point of a place of love. And
mm,
how do you transition from that to the other one? And
mm.
also, how do you, like, at some point, like, I'm pretty sure you made a pact with yourself. You're like, okay, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to give up
Mm.
like everything to do this. How do you gather that courage?
Um, okay, so maybe like to address like consulting and jewelry is like worlds apart. But I actually come from a family of goldsmiths, so I'm third
Mhm.
generation goldsmith. My grandparents, my uncle and aunties are goldsmith. Not my mom per se or my dad. It's my mom's side of the family. But growing up, my mom always had a lot of beading work. She would do the super intricate beading jewelry, super beautiful. So she's very creative herself. And I grew up drawing. I love drawing. I love painting. I love anything handicraft. So I always knew like, art was my escape, right? But I remember thinking about this as a kid. I remember like I really love art, but I don't fit the mold of an art student because I was also really good at studying and I was really good at getting grades. So
Mm.
I remember asking myself like, oh, I can't do art because I can't throw away my smarts was what I was told. And actually this was the narrative my dad fed me because I wanted to go to a mass communication school for
Mm-hmm.
college. And this was college before university in the UK, right? And he was like, why would you do that? You're smart. Don't throw that away. So because of that, I was like, okay, fine. Like, let's go study in a proper school. Like, I'm not
The
saying the art
proper
school wasn't
school.
proper. Sorry, but you see, that is where my mind was, right? That was how like I was molded. And I was like, okay, this is serious school, this is fun school, this is like, that was how I was thinking about it. And until today, I mean, like, I'm probably pissing a lot of people off because those are public school too. But this was kind of like the upbringing that I had.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for
I agree
me,
with you. Even
art.
I agree with you. Even just I think a week or two ago, I was telling my husband, I was like, I just realized I'm actually not a serious person, and it's so. I mean, I don't even know where that thought came from, but it's also just
Mm.
weird to even admit to yourself, right? Because say like 10 years ago, your
Yeah.
person be like, oh, Crystal, you're not a serious person. Like you're in professional services, but you're not serious. I would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? But then now I'm like, it feels so good to be like, this is me,
Just
right?
be yourself. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
funny you said that because
yes.
sorry, I was just alluding to your point as well. Because it's funny because when I was in consulting, I was told to tone down, not be so nice, and not be so happy all the time.
Well, you were very nice and happy, and that's my impression of you. So that was
I know I
accurate.
had like a friend in consulting who was like, Eva made friends with everyone on the floor in like the first week of her job. Like I don't even know half the people after 4 years being here. So I feel like I was always like struggling to try and fit into the mold and be like, this is what a manager should look like. This is what a successful person should look like, And most of the time I'm like grapple with the idea of it, and then I'm like, fuck off. But
Yeah.
then coming back to your question, right? Like, so I've always been exposed to jewelry. It's a family trade. I have always seen my mom do it and gift it out for free. And actually, this is my third jewelry business. It's not my first. My first was when I was working in the UK and I just wanted to learn the trade real quick. I was like, okay, what does that really mean? So I used to buy and sell and I like do it. And I was like, oh, this is what margin means. This is how you pull together a collection. This is what I don't want to do. Was what I realized that business model was not for me because like you said, I found it more meaning behind the process of creating
Yeah.
something that I designed, right? The process of
Uniquely
making
you.
it. Correct. And I found that as like a release and as my way of like expressing myself. So fast forward, I had second jewelry business with my mom. Realized she's not a great business partner. She's a perfect mother, but she's not a great business partner. And I realized that hey, like why live by what other people define what your boundaries should be, right? And that was where I was like, you know what? If I don't do it now, when am I ever going to do it? And I think for the longest time when I was in consulting, I was good at it. And I was like, yeah, if I become partner, I would have a great life. Money wouldn't be a problem. I enjoy doing it, to be fair.
Mhm.
Like, I felt like, and there's difference, right, between your passion and you enjoying because you're good at it. And I think a lot of times, and it's okay to enjoy it because you're good at it, but even better if you enjoy it because you're passionate about it
You love
and
it.
you're good at it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think everyone is blessed with that opportunity, but I would say, like, I'm very blessed to be able to do that, right? And honestly, it took me one whole year to go from the thought of, like, okay, maybe we will do this to really getting over, like, the emotional
Mm.
or, like, the societal pressure to get over it. Because, one, it was, like, the uncertainty, right? I wouldn't know what it would turn out to be. I don't know if my business is going to be successful. I don't know if 6 months down the road I'd be like, oh, actually, it's not what I think it is, and therefore I want to go back to work potentially. I don't know, right? The opportunity cost. I remember asking myself, I was so close to promotion. Should I just stay and then like make principal and then like it's always like
I've heard so many
the
people saying
next.
that though. In fact, I have other friends who are like, yeah, I'm gonna make it to this promotion and I'm gonna quit and do whatever I want to do. Did you go through with that? I think you went through with it, right?
I went through till well, no, I stayed on a bit longer as a manager, but I didn't go through the promotion for a principal because I was just
Mm.
like, And I remember them, the team trying to hold me, like tell me like, hey, like Eva, just wait for a bit more. Like we were in the middle of like this launch of something. I agreed to stay. I
Mm.
agreed to stay on and finish off that project. And then I was like, no, this is my timeline. Like I gotta go do this for myself. I did kind of like I was a contractor for a bit, so I
Yeah.
was doing it on the side
Right.
because like I still needed to be tactical about it, right? To be able to build a business, especially a brand in this industry, you need a lot of cash,
You need it.
right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, a
Cash
ton
and
of cash,
connection.
right? Cash, connection, and you need to be able to buy time, right?
Mm.
The longer your runway, the higher your chance of success as well, right? And a lot of people fall and go back to work because they don't have the cash flow to say, I'm gonna not take a pay for how many years, right? Um, so that was where I was like very tactical, and I thought to myself, there were four things that I kind of like had to get myself into good shape in terms of mentally
Mm.
to say, okay, I think this is the right time. So the first one was like, have I made enough money to last me for at least 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years? And this is cash, yeah, like not savings, right? Because you're not gonna touch your savings. I mean, unless you're like, hey, this is $1 million idea and like we're just missing that amount of money, sure. But like you need enough cash just to sustain your lifestyle. And then on top of that, like to invest into business. And one thing I never knew about business was until I started a business is you as you grow bigger, you actually need more money.
Especially for physical products. Yeah, because you gotta
Yes,
have
inventory,
yeah
right?
inventory.
You need to build a brand. You need to pay for campaigns, etc.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Yeah, right. I don't even do ads now because I don't have that cash flow to be able to do that. But like that's the thing, right? Like if I knew, maybe I would have like been more frugal on certain areas and like kept that cash. Right, but I didn't know that like the more you grow, the more money you need because I thought like whatever revenue that you make would be enough to cover the next flow. Sure, you can, but it will be a very slow hamster wheel because like sometimes your growth is like maybe like you have to lay the foundation like
mm.
6 months before or like the opportunity is like a 3 step ahead, not like your individual half a step, half a step, half a step, right? But in order to get there, you need the capital, and the capital is so much more than whatever revenue that you have. So number one was always like, do I have enough cash to sustain me? And honestly, oh my god, I don't think I've told people this, especially not on a podcast. Whatever money you think you have, multiply that by like build another like 6 to 7 months buffer because so after I quit my job, I was very happy. I was like starting with my business, etc. And you know how like when you transition out, you have to like pay taxes and like you have to like let your accounts be like reviewed by the government. So I was working in
Yeah.
Singapore. That was what happened, right? And I remember the company holding like 2.5 months or 3 months salary, and 3 months salary plus all the holidays that I didn't take. I had a referral bonus. Okay, this is too much information, but anyway, I had quite a lot of buffer there, and I was like, okay, I'm good to go, right?
Yeah.
And I remember one day where HR came back to me and like, okay, Eva, we've gone through tax tracks and everything, and like, um, we don't need to return you anything. And I was like, wait, what? That was like my 1 year runway because I moved back to Malaysia to be able to afford running a business
Yeah.
and not taking
Yeah.
a pay for a long time, right? And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? That's gonna be like my 8 to 12 months runway, and you were telling me it's just gone. And
Was
that
it
was where
because
I
of
went into panic.
a tax or something? Like that's why they're holding
Yeah, so I was really silly. When I was working in the UK, everything was done for me by HR. So like tax would be deducted before your salary comes in to your account. In Singapore, it works slightly differently where you get paid the full amount and then you have to pay out tax. Nobody told me that was an agreement in my tax. I was just auto debiting it every month and I was just like, okay, I'm paying tax. I'm good, right? It turns out that there were increments that needed to be paid. That in itself cost me 1 year runway. And I remember when I found out, I was just like shocked. And I was just telling myself, okay, maybe I should just go back to work. Because
Yeah,
I
because
don't
that's
have the runway I thought I had.
yeah, because it just cut the runway off by half, right? So then what happens? So did you manage that? Like, how did you manage that after?
I sucked it up and just powered through. I had a reality check with my then boyfriend, now husband, and we were like, okay, cut on your coffee, cut on your lifestyle, stop buying anything, like don't buy that handbag. And I remember crying and crying and crying because I was very used to the comfortable lifestyle. Like I
Yeah,
love
of
buying
course.
food for people, I love gifting people. I had to stop all of that, like It was a
Yeah.
reality check, right?
Yeah.
Like,
It's
so
almost like a
yeah.
part of your identity that's gone, right? Because you are this person, and now you don't even, like I love how you say that. The first
Who
thing you
am
said was
I?
like, I gotta cut that coffee because that's always the first thing to go, right? Like that
Yeah.
whatever $6-7
Yeah.
latte that you get every day.
It adds up, right? Yeah. So financially, I would say number one, like whatever you think you need, add that by 60%. And for me, it was like, okay, make sure I align my exit date to when bonus is paid out so that I have that buffer.
Mm-hmm.
Number two was, do I have enough credential where my reputation and my credibility is at least weighted in the outside world? Because like you say, right? If you are like you don't have that certain, I still hate to say this, like you still need certain credential and certain capabilities to be able to build trust and for people to open doors to you, right?
Right.
Can you imagine if I'm going fundraising and I say I'm a high school graduate and I've never had like kept up like a job, and like like it's so much harder to open doors
It is. Yeah.
versus
It is.
right saying like I spent 9 years in consulting, I went to LSE, I was first class honor, like
You have a
the
story to
truth
tell.
is, correct. The truth is, you can't run away from the world that you are living in,
No.
right?
Yeah.
So you still need to live in that realm. As much as a rebel you want to be tactical and strategic about it.
It's funny because I was just in Bali for like maybe a
Yeah.
month and a half this year, and it really opened my eyes to how these people live. Like some of them
Mm.
have like I don't know a few $1,000s, like a few $100s in their bank account, but they're so happy. And I mean obviously like
That's
for
fine.
me,
That's
yeah,
fine.
for me like I probably can't do it just because I will probably freak out so much. But it's like for them, they just trust like the money will
Mm.
come. Obviously, it's a completely different lifestyle. That's why I really wanted to ask this question because it's like when you are making a multi six-figure income every year, and there's a lot of perks on top of that too, and travel
Mm.
and that lifestyle and the prestige, and all of a sudden you don't have those things anymore. And then you're building this business, so you're actually bleeding out money. And
Yeah.
like, not only was the tangible stuff gone, but also the intangible stuff, right? Before, you can be like telling people, oh, I'm like a management consultant of like Oliver Wyman. Like people immediately think that you're smart. Like they don't even need it
Yeah.
to be like, oh, what is your IQ or whatever your
Yeah.
SAT score. But like they know, right? But then now that you're like, oh, but I did all these things, and then like, so like it's right, like it's
Girl,
yeah.
like 100%, like hammer on the head of the nail because, uh, truth be told, when I first quit, for the first 6 months, when people ask me what I do, I'm so embarrassed. I couldn't say it without laughing or like not wanting to say it, and I lost my identity for a bit. I really did. I was like, I can't go buy that bag, which I love. I love handbags, by the way.
Who doesn't?
Right? I have to think before I go on holiday because holidays are expensive, and the way I traveled back in the days, I'm like, no, that all have to go, right? And people are asking me, and I'm like, people would probably think but that's the problem. I played that narrative to myself, right? I told myself, oh my god, like I'm doing jewelry. People would think I'm like whatever, right? Like people would like nobody actually judged me. I was judging myself. I was so hard on myself because I actually think the way you live your life is very much a narrative of what you've told yourself all this while, right?
It is
And that was
true.
narrative, right?
Because I
Like,
think jewelry is cool. I think it's very cool. I mean, like,
yeah. Now I can say that very proudly that this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm building, and this is why we're different, right? But it took a while. It took me one whole year to get there. And honestly, like I cried so many nights over not having enough cash in my bank account, having to pull from savings, having to do this, having to do that. And like honestly, like you said, oh, people have a couple of thousand and they're comfortable. At one point, I had like a couple of hundred in my business bank account, and I was shitting in my pants. But I was just like, you know what? This is the new normal. This is literally the new normal because like especially if you're starting a brand that requires a lot of investment into reinvestment into growth. You're buying products. You're paying labor costs first because you need a product, right? You need to spend money in campaigns because nobody sees you, nobody knows, nobody buys you, right?
yep.
You need to spend a lot of money on like storytelling, on investment in the future, etc., etc. So to have money in your bank account and keep it like positive cash flow is really challenging, especially in a product business. I think there's a difference between service business and product business, because service business is not cash flow heavy, but it is manpower heavy, right? You might not be able to scale that fast. You might not be able to find the same quality of manpower. So it's a very different kind of business.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started as well, like people were like, why are you still cash flow? Like, strap.
But I think it's actually a good sign that you only have. I mean, like I had, a moment where I also only had a few $100 in my business account, and I think it was actually a good sign that if you're growing and you're pouring cash into it to support that growth, it's much better than like just parking, money in your account where you can't even invest, right? Because it's not growing as fast.
Correct. And I think that was also the change in mindset that I had to go through in the transition. In consulting days, it's like, oh, the next salary, oh my god, my bank account is going up. And then like your bonus,
everything is gain.
Oh my god, and right, it's like, wow. And then you'd be like, okay, where do I invest in? But then in investing, you also see money growing, right? Sure, there's up and down, but it grows. And I took a lot of pride in that. I'm like, oh my god, okay, I'm doing well in my career. I'm growing up. But then when you start running a business, it is no longer like that. You should not amass cash where it's like a lot of money sitting in the bank account, because that just means that you're not investing fast enough. You're not actually, you're maybe feeling like you have a lot of that money and therefore you're using it to pay yourself a salary or like buy more stuff or like inflate your lifestyle. But the reality is that money is meant for you to grow your business. So I always think like when you run a business, the mindset shift around financials changes so much. Because that is where I was like, okay, like I have to spend money in order to make money. And while I am not seeing the hike in number and seeing the deterioration of number, what I'm doing is building brand value over time, because this is going to be worth something 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, right?
It's so amazing that you tell yourself that, because how did you even
get to that?
Get yourself used to that narrative, because it's so hard, it's so much easier to preserve wealth, right? And it's so much harder to invest, and I trust it's going to come back to you, because that's not tangible.
Yeah, no, I agree. Oh my god, like I would not say it's easy. A lot of nights crying for the many, many years that, well, I've done this for almost 3 years since I quit my job. Inari has been around for 2.5 years, almost three, turning three soon. So, I mean, look, the reality is it doesn't get easier. You will cry. You will still feel the pressure. I still feel the pressure whenever like our bank account is like low, right? But then when we have revenue coming back in, because we're a very like seasonal product, right?
Yeah.
And we also realize some of our distribution channel means cash conversion cycle is a lot slower, because you might have made that revenue, but you don't get the cash in hand. And you might get it 2 months down the road. Sometimes you need cash all at the same time. And that is where it's difficult, right? So I won't say it's easy. And honestly, I still go through it. It was a lot of nights of crying. It was a lot of like, I thank my husband for being here. I am honestly super lucky to have met him, because your support system is so important.
So important. Especially when you're
so
entrepreneur.
Important. Yeah, like I cried to my mom, I cried to my husband, I cried to my friends. But you do all that, you pick yourself back up, you strategize, and you move forward. And that is the only way I know. Like, pick yourself back up and go forward. But you have to process the emotion, because I feel like people don't also recognize that they have to process the emotion, because otherwise it's correct. Otherwise, no, but like sometimes it's also like, to know that this is normal, it is scary, it is a lot of like instability, and you need to process that emotion. If you don't process the fear, the anxiety, etc., what you're going to do is you're going to bottle it up and you're going to burn it out, and then you're going to lose love to whatever you're building, right? So I always believe when you feel it, don't let it bottle up. Go and like relive your life. Go on a short holiday, or go out with your friends. Go get a massage, right? Feel human again. Like cry about it. Process it with your therapist if you have one, or like whoever, and then come back stronger. And come back with that mindset of like, yep, okay, I know why I'm feeling this way, and I know that this is scary, but I know that the only way is forward, and just do it.
You said that you grew up in a family where money, was important, and stability is important. And now that coming to this stage where you run, a physical product business, physical product business, which means that you needed to reinvest a lot of capital into the business itself, and you need to constantly challenge your own money mindset.
Yeah.
What is the thing that's driving you forward? Because you said that that's the only way, but the truth is, we always, if a person doesn't have that gut, and they will just give up. They're like, this is not my belief system. I believe in security. I believe in safety. Like, this is not what I signed up for, and I'm in a mistake. I'm gonna go back. But for you, you just move forward. So what's the drive? What's the core motivation for you to not give up?
I feel like jewelry is really my passion and my purpose. I know it's a strong thing to say, and I can really say that I feel very strongly about this because I mean, it goes into all the reason as to why I started this business, etc. And it was very much, maybe not in very many words, but the gist of it is I moved back from overseas. I realized that, in the Asian market, there's just a lot of greenwashing, opaqueness. Nobody's teaching, nobody is educating the consumer market. And fast fashion prevails, all of this, right? What about heritage? What about conscious consumer? What about like educating your customer about what they are buying, right? And what about actually investing in things that are heirloom? But again, gold prices are super high. So what's the in between? The middle market is growing, right? So for me, I feel like there is a gap, or maybe rather a space or an opportunity to do more for the rising middle class in Malaysia or in Southeast Asia even. Right? Because my target audience are buying from overseas and importing it in because there are not a lot of options here, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I was like, there's a very strong sense of economic purpose and social purpose. But also, second of all, it's like my passion because when I see it as a family heritage, I've always been exposed to it since young. I was always sitting at my grandparents' like goldsmith shop. I see my mom making it. Even though it's not like my direct nucleus family that's doing it, I still really love the art of like putting something from nothing and like the imagination behind it and the ability to tell a story through something that could be an heirloom for the rest of your life, passed down from generation to generation. So why am I buying something that I'll wear a couple of times and then I'll throw it away? Because as I grow as an adult, as a consumer, I'm more conscious of like my consumption. And I'm also only wanting to invest in like, organic stuff, investing in like sustainably produced goods. My mindset has shifted, and I think there is that space here to be able to do that. So definitely a lot of sense of purpose and a lot of passion.
Right.
Because it's very hard to do it otherwise.
It is very hard. And do you think that if you were to say fold, right, when you were faced with these challenges, it will almost be like giving up a part of yourself?
Yeah. I mean, like, okay, honestly, like, I was going through some things very recently where I was just like, okay, I set myself down and I was like, this is not sustainable. The way I'm trying to grow it is not sustainable. And that was where I have to, like, because I'm bootstrapping everything, right? But I also have a bigger mission. And this is where I'm like, okay, if I want to achieve that mission, what is the best way forward without impacting my mental health, without impacting my physical health, etc.? Because as you grow, you need more people, you need more capital, you need more, etc., 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 right? And for the longest time, I didn't want to do it, and I didn't want to go fundraise. I didn't want to put myself like out there because, like, who wants to invest in like a traditional business? But the reality, I was telling myself all of these narratives, right? It's how it's storytelling. A lot of it is storytelling too, right? And coming back to your question, that was when my husband asked me, you either do this or you go back to work, right? Because you could still go back to your consulting job if you want to. And that was where I cried so hard and I could not
I don't want
imagine. I was like, no, this is like giving up the whole identity that I built for myself over the past 3 years, right? And I feel like that would be, for me, giving up on my hopes and dreams and everything I believe in.
Yeah,
and
for
I
sure.
would basically put myself back in the cage. Is how I feel.
Yeah.
No offense. I don't think everyone should be an entrepreneur.
Of course not. Yeah.
Right? And I think to some people, a corporate stable job is great because they feel passionate about it, they find purpose in it. But it's just for me, my passion and my purpose lies in what I'm doing right now. So for me, going back to the corporate world felt like a cage, right? But for some people, it might feel like freedom. So to each their own. I'm just talking on like my own personal journey and what I believe in. Yeah.
I was reading the book Shoe Dog from Phil Knight, right? Because he's the co-founder of Nike. And he said something very similar because it's also a consumer business and they are constantly cash trapped. For him, it was decades. Right? He said that it was just not possible for him to give up because he doesn't know what else he's gonna do if he doesn't do Nike, if he doesn't do sports shoes. So it doesn't matter how hard it was, cash wise, financial wise, he persisted. And it's, I think that's almost like, it's almost your trump card to fulfill that purpose, right? Because who's going to, if you're gonna cut off like arm and leg for you to give up, you're not gonna give up, right? It's like that is a deeper pain for than financial hardship and fulfillment. I think what he did was that, you know, at some point he was working for PwC and he just funneled the cash that he made there to Nike, and he did that for a while, right? And but he was making money to support his business. He wasn't like, okay, I'm not gonna do this anymore. I'm gonna just go back to PwC, right? That's it.
Yeah, exactly, right? And this is why people always say, find something you're passionate about. Because I've known so many people who started a business because they find that easy money. But money is never easy, yeah?
No, it's never easy.
It's never easy. You might make easy money now, but then once that money goes away because trend has changed or like something gets hard, you give up. It's so much easier to give up.
It's also when you make money, you still need to do something. You know, you still need to do something with your life, right? So what is that thing you wanted to do that is more important than money itself? Because it's more of a sustainable question, right, than money.
Yeah. And but I think also like just recognizing that right, that money is important, and I would think that I have the privilege to say that, you know, it is okay for me to take a chance on myself and not worry about money for me. I mean, I worry about money all the time. But, like, at least I am not saying, like, supporting 3 kids, going to school, single mom, right? I think that would be quite hard. Or, like, if your parents are old and they need medical support, that is hard. I would say that you're not always blessed with the perfect environment to be able to say money is not important. But in my case, I'm very blessed to be able to say, I can live with some uncertainty for a while.
Yeah.
And also, be able to go pursue my dreams.
I do think it's your choice and it's your risk tolerance, because for some people, it's probably too much for them, right? They can't live with that. They need to have like a lot of buffer and stuff like that. But for you, like, I think that you really prioritize that dream and you walk the walk too. Because some people, everybody can be like, oh, I have a dream, but like not everybody does it.
Yeah, it's true. It's a lot easier to say than actually execute. Execution is the hardest part. And you know how funny it is when people don't want to share ideas because they're like, oh my god, someone's going to copy it. Yeah. The reality is to execute
so
it
hard
is
to copy.
Hard. It's so hard.
Yeah, for sure. So what does it mean for you? Because you just mentioned, and I know this too, and I saw that, and I mean, immensely proud of you, because I saw that you're featured in New York Fashion Week, as you said, Harper's Bazaar. After coming from corporate world, what does that mean for you?
It's so surreal because it didn't feel like it was real life. Because I remember I was like in New York and I was just like, I had to make a decision 2 weeks beforehand. I was like, forget about it, let's just go. And a lot of people were like, you know, don't do it, it's too risky. I actually didn't tell anyone, my parents. Oh, well, I told my mom. Mom was the only one who knew. And even then she tried to talk me out of it, but I was able to convince her to let me go. Nobody else knew. And I went and I was walking down the streets of New York and I was just like, wow, like, it is really, like, imagine this, right? Like, anything you put an effort into is not pigeonholed by, like, boundaries. What, like, the world is your oyster is how I felt. Like, you determine where you want to go. You determine what opportunity you want to say yes to and no to, and you control your life. That was how I felt. And I felt so much freedom, and I felt like, wow, I never thought this was possible, but look at where we are, right? And I was just thinking to myself, like, if I was still in corporate, my promotion will be determined by who my bosses are. It's determined by the projects that I'm given. It's determined by whether I get staffed. You know, a whole bunch of stuff. But this is where I truly
But not you. But they're determined by other people, but not you.
Correct. Like, all I need to do is just work hard and work smart and be the best I can and give everything. But then I realized that now that I still do that, I work hard. I'm not saying you come out and you're like, freedom, right? But like, I come out, I work hard. I work damn hard. I wake up at 2 a.m. when I can't sleep and I'm like building my model or like thinking about things, right? But it doesn't feel like work. It's so foreign to me to think that it doesn't feel like work. It's so crazy. And I'm also like immensely grateful, right? But that was when I first realized what an ultimate freedom it is to be able to run your own thing because what you can imagine, you can do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it sounds
And
so weird, but like
it's
it's
also
true.
like people can recognize it because what there is a process where you're like, this doesn't feel work to me, and I feel I enjoy it. But it's another
Mm,
thing to be like, people are saying that, hey, I think that you're doing a good job. Like, I think I'm saying that with my money. I'm saying that with my stamp, right? Like, doesn't matter whether it's
mm.
PR or marketing, whatever that is, right? Endorsements, it realize it in reality, and that is a different feeling too.
Yeah, correct. And I think this is where it actually helped me and my not good enough imposter syndrome side of things. Having these actually helped me make me realize that hey, actually, but you're not that bad. Because I always don't feel good enough, you see, right? It's again like a bad habit and trait that I carry along in my adulthood and in my business career. But I also, you can always look at something in a negative lens. But I try and look at a different lens because if I feel like I'm always not good enough, I will want to do better. And that's only gonna fuel me to grow even more.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like, it helps to,
Right.
yeah, it helps to have validation for sure.
Yeah.
But also the realization of freedom. Yeah.
So I wanted to jump on that point because I believe that a lot of not feeling that we are good enough, which
Mm,
I do tend to, it's probably a universal thing, but I see that a lot in Asian culture
mm,
also, is that it actually came from a place of conditional love, right? So when we are growing up,
mm,
you probably already know this. If we don't get love for who we are, but for what we do
mm.
or how we have achieved the result of
Yeah.
certain behaviors, then
Yeah.
it's like you don't think that you have certain innate value. Is your value is
Mm.
determined by the things you have achieved, right? And then
Yeah. Your identity.
that always need to be fed.
Mm,
Versus if you know that doesn't matter what you do or you don't do, or
mm.
what you don't achieve, you still have that value, then nobody can take that away from you. There's pros and cons for the motivation. And I
Yeah.
recently gone to a transition where I needed to
Mm,
acknowledge that I have that value, and I
mm,
don't need to do everything and anything to prove it. And the
mm.
pros is that you are a lot more at peace, but the con is that you also get a bit lazier because you're just like, okay, well, I don't want to do. I don't need to be busy. I don't need to be like working 20 hours a day. Like the motivation actually went away because you don't
Okay.
feel. Yeah.
So two things that you mentioned, right? I hope I remember it. So I think that's okay. So the first thing is, on a bigger picture, I think what business taught me more than actually running a business is about myself.
Yeah.
I learned so much about shedding away bad perceptions that I have fed to myself growing up, right? Like you say, being lazy, like, oh, success looks like this, like, I'm not good enough. Business has actually given me so much to be able to learn about myself,
Yes.
and build my mental strength. Like, I don't think this is a crash course that you can go and sign up somewhere and like do a 1 year theoretical learning
It's not
and
teachable.
it's not teachable. I don't think so. But I have changed so much as a person. I've matured so much in the past 3 years. My view of life has changed. What is important to me has changed. Yeah, like how I anchor myself has changed. So definitely, like, more important than anything else, business will grow you in a
Right.
good way if you allow it to, right? And then
Right.
second point, when you were saying you're so lazy because you're not working, like the motivation is gone. So that was how I felt too, right? When I was like driving down, going for a bank appointment in the middle of the day, getting my hair cut in the middle of the day, I used to feel so shit about myself. I was just like, Eva, you're not
You're not
working.
working.
You're not working. How dare you? And that was what I was literally telling myself. How dare you? Like, your friends are all working and here you are driving to the hair
All
salon.
these stories you tell yourself of like, oh my gosh, like no
Correct.
wonder I'm gonna fail. I'm gonna go bankrupt because I'm not
Right.
working. And then yeah,
Yeah.
they're slaying
But
it.
then, yeah, but then the reality is, I forget to tell myself, like, when they're sleeping, I'm working. When they're off on a weekend having brunch, I'm working. I'm working
You're thinking.
24/7. I'm working 24/7. The only reason why I go to a facial in the middle of the day or a haircut in the middle of the day is because this is the most optimal time I can go where I save the most time and get the things I need to done in the shortest period of time, right? So that I have more time to work.
But you also have a lot more freedom so that you can afford that, right? That's your lifestyle. You can't afford that lifestyle.
Yeah, and then slowly, obviously, like as the business grow, I have a team, I learn to let go, and I realize that my job scope now changes, right? My role changes. I shouldn't be doing because okay, like if you think about starting a business, when you start
Yeah.
small, you are everything. You do the packing, you take the order, you do finances, you do social media, you do everything, right? And therefore you're always busy. But then as your business grow, you have team members. Your team members start taking things on, right? They take on responsibility that frees up your time. Sure, you have two things you can do. You either use that free time to enjoy life, or if you feel like, hey, you haven't really grown to the stage that you want to and there are more things to do, you then refocus your focus area into something else. Okay, now I need to start thinking about XYZ. Now I need to think about campaigns. I need to think about hiring more people. I need to think about funding. I need to think about retail space, whatever, right? Like, you always have to ask yourself, what is your end goal? Where do you want to grow? And that changes all the time, right? So, like, I always do this health check where I'm like, what's my purpose? Am I growing in the right direction? Because it's so easy to also just do and feel like busy is equivalent to success, right? Like, being productive and not busy means lazy. But what I realized is not busy is good because I've built a system that my team like can run without me. And that frees up my time to go for a walk. And when I go for a walk, I think about the potential. I think about ideas. I think about what to do next, right? And that allows me to come back at it at a fresh perspective with new goals.
Right.
So, for example, like actually Q1 has been very, very slow for us because I was moving house, I was getting married, my husband went through surgery, etc., right? So Q1 has been super quiet, and I've been away most of the time. I have not been in town. And initially, I was like so guilty, and I'm like, oh, my team doesn't see me. It feels so bad. Like they must think I'm lazy. And I'm like, what the heck am I thinking, right? But me being away has fueled so much ideas and growth in the past couple of weeks. And I was just like, honestly, if I could, I would go away for 2 weeks every quarter.
What do you think is the reason for that? Like, how come it's actually helped in a way?
Because I think when you're growing, you're always busy. When you're busy, you forget to stop and think whether what you're busy with is essential and what you're busy with is the right busy, right?
Because doing it becomes easy. Yeah, it's like momentum, right? And you don't need to think about whether you're doing the right thing. You just need to know that you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why people have tick boxes exercise, right? Because every time you tick something on, you feel good. And being busy when you're doing, it feels good. But you tend to forget whether you're doing the right thing. And people don't usually have time to think. And I don't know which book I was reading. I was reading a book, and it was saying that if you could carve out time to go on holiday, and I actually find that super helpful. Every time I go on a holiday, and I usually go 2 weeks, and people always say like, you're starting a new business, you shouldn't go off for so long, you should be in place, blah, 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 you need to start focusing. And I honestly, if the business can't run without me, I've failed to build a business because I'm the business,
That's true.
right?
Yeah.
Right? So I have told my team from the get-go, and I love my team for this, and they were like, Eva, you have to let go, trust us. And being able to do that and say, go off for 2 weeks and like be inspired by things around you, see how people are working, see how things are done. Actually, mental break is so important because, again, you ask yourself, like, am I in this for the long run, or am I just trying to, make quick money, like sell this thing off, or like whatever, make my money and then go off, right? I'm in the long game. So for me, mental health is super important. Like not getting burned out is super important. I had a coach and she was like, Eva, before you fill anybody else's cup, fill your own cup. Because if you have nothing else to give, then there's nothing left in you. And you'll feel miserable in whatever you do. And therefore you can't give more. Because I love giving.
Yeah.
But she reminded me that if you don't have anything else to give, then what's the point?
Well, do you think it's challenging to do that? Because I've heard this in different forms from different people. For example, the people who are parents, right? They wanted to put their kids first. They said that, I'll do anything for my kids, but they don't think that being selfish can enable them to be better parents, or put themselves first can enable them to be better parents. It's really hard to do. So, but it's like, it's one of those things where, it makes sense, but do you find challenging when you're doing it or trying to make it happen?
For sure. I think it goes without saying, right? It's very hard. You understand a concept, right? That's why I say, like, understanding and believing is two different things. Or like, you understand, but your heart and your mind might not agree. Believing is when you fully like live what you
You
say,
embodied it.
right? And you don't always get to believing straight away, is what I realized. And this is where, for me, the way I cope with my thought process is I like to talk about it. Because when I talk about it, I process it in my head. And as I repeat it, I believe it. And then I live it. And then when
Mm,
I live it, I realize it's possible. And then
mm,
it kind of like just really enforces the belief system. So that is how I do it. Maybe to other people would be I need to talk to people who have done it multiple times. Or like I need people to tell me that, this is the right thing. And therefore they go networking, right? And when they see
yeah,
enough case studies, they were like, okay, this is the right thing to do. And that may be their system to turn an understanding into a belief.
right.
So it takes a while.
Yeah, or maybe it takes a burnout or something that tragic that happened and people course correct. But
Yeah.
it's
We
good
hope
that
that doesn't happen, right?
yeah. So that's why I'm asking because it's again maybe a little bit off topic, but I talk to guys who they're very successful, they're very driven. This happened to me recently, a few times now, where a few of them I talked to, they had like back surgeries, and because they had so much
Mm,
stress, and it hit them so hard that they needed to
slow
re-examine
down.
everything because they're so extreme. They're like chasing
Yeah.
that, and they're so focused on it. And then nothing will take them out of that mode other than something that's very drastic. But it's good that
Mm,
you have the ability to, I felt like you have the ability to take feedback and also to think whether this is going to help me. And even if it doesn't make sense intuitively at the
mm,
moment, you're willing to
mm.
give it a shot and be like, maybe it will help. And then let me find a way for me to see if I can do it. So I think
Yeah.
that is good because that will prevent anything too extreme from happening for you to learn that lesson.
Yeah, because I mean, like, not everybody recovers from burnout, so you don't want a cycle where it's like that, right, and then come back up.
Yeah,
Whereas you want a cycle that looks healthier like that, right? And I
yeah,
think that is important versus like that because this is, I mean, like if you look at the whole like your heartbeat machine that right when you do that you die.
BCG. Yeah,
When you do this you're alive, right? So in my mind, I'm like, as much as I want to grow my business, I have to make sure I'm alive.
mm,
So smaller, the ups and downs,
yeah.
right? Versus like a plunge, because that plunge you might never recover from.
Right, right. I mean, that
Yeah,
takes
is how I
wisdom. That
see it.
takes a lot of wisdom for people to
Be
know
able
and
to
then
process.
exactly, exactly.
I've been told when I was in my 20s that I think like I'm in my 40s.
So how do you define success now versus when you were in Oliver Wyman?
Success is when I'm happy doing what I love. And it's not monetary, it's not anything else, it's just feeling happy. Now I
Mm,
prioritize my own well being and my happiness and my purpose. I think before it was very much, oh, like the next promotion, the next increment, what can I buy from that, which holiday, wow, sitting business class. Now it's like, whatever, I don't really care about all of those material goods anymore. I just care about how I feel and how I make
so
people around me feel.
So when you're comparing the current you and the you at the time, what made that change? What's the number one thing that is different, like in terms of that person who's living this life versus that life?
I think my purpose. Yeah. It's my sense of purpose. My sense of purpose before was to make a lot of money and to be like the top in everything I do. But now my sense of purpose is like taking care of myself first. I come
Mm,
first. Like not anything not anything that is like calculated or measured. Maybe you can measure how you feel, but like I prioritize myself more. Yeah. My purpose
and
has
also,
changed.
I think that signals ability to take uncertainty because when you needed to
Yes.
measure something, like to feel safe, you needed to have
Mm,
that security. But like the fact is, nothing in life is secure, and the fact
exactly.
that if you can sit in that discomfort, that means growth, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think that is what I've gotten really good at. I'm now like, okay, I don't know what's happening. And honestly, this is what you learn along the way, right? Like as you plan, you realize that your plan goes out the window in like one day sometimes. You might spend like, 3 full weeks building out this beautiful plan. One change can change all of it, right? So I'm like, sure, have that plan, but like things are gonna change. And what's more important is how you react to it and like whether you say yes or no, or like what are you gonna do with that opportunity or that
Yeah, for
information that
sure.
you're given. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. How do you adapt when you have new
correct.
information?
Correct. That is more important.
Yeah. So what does rebellion mean to you now?
Wow. I've always been like model student, model kid, model everything.
But you,
Don't
you also
really
said that
quite
you're very
understand.
rebellious to your dad.
To be honest, I think I always describe myself as like, how do you say? Okay, so when I was in high school, I was like hit girl of the school. But then every time people are like, oh my god, whenever they meet me now, they're like, oh my god, but you used to be the head girl. I'm like, yeah, but if I wasn't the head girl, I would be the number one rebel in school, literally. And I think I've always been quite extreme. I either follow the rules to the T and make sure everyone follows it, or like I would go completely and I question it. So I feel like all my life I've lived in this extreme where I'm like,
You
this
have
is the
two
rule, this is
sides.
how it should like, right? I'm like, but I've always lived this side because this is what success looks like. This is what good student looks like. This is what a good child looks like. But then I think after like 30 odd years of living that life, I realized that, hey, I'm actually like, I want to live the complete opposite right now. Like question, I want to challenge what
Yeah.
is per se the status quo. I think with
Right.
living status quo, it's so easy. Status quo is the lazy way to go, is how I think about it, right? Because like I think if you notice and you're aware of like how things work around you, even if you go to the hospital or like you go and like take money out of the bank, there are certain things that are done today the way that's done because it is how it's always been done.
Yeah.
But for me now, I'm always like, for me, being a rebel means questioning status quo.
Yeah.
Like, is this how it should be done? But why? And it's funny, right? Sometimes when you ask someone why it's this way, they cannot answer you. And that's
I never
when
thought
you know
about it.
people are, they never know about it. And like people are just, living life in autopilot mode. And you're only given really one life. Is that the mode you want to live in? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, definitely not for me, right? So for me, like being a rebel is like questioning status quo. Like,
Yeah.
why must this? Who said this is the right way?
The last question is, finish the sentence. I'm proud of myself because I asked everybody that question, by the way.
I'm proud of myself because I live true to who I am. Yeah, I
That
live
is so
true
beautiful.
to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, that is like the greatest achievement I feel like in this short journey that I've had in entrepreneurship so far.
If this conversation sparked something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are building a more true life, not just more impressive, we would love to hear your story. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Asian Rebel Club and join our newsletter for more ways to connect. Link in the description. Until next time.